What happens when the man who owns the company straps on a delivery vest and finds out his drivers are being punished for things they didn't do? Zane Whitlow parked the faded white van outside a 3-story apartment complex in downtown Columbus. It was just after 6 in the morning, and the streets were still quiet, except for the rustle of leaves and the low hum of delivery trucks. He adjusted the oversized ball cap on his head, pulled the dark hoodie tighter around his face, and studied the delivery app on the cracked phone he'd been issued. 10 grocery delivery centers. That's what he owned. He'd bought the small chain 6 years ago from a retiring couple who ran it like a family business. Since then, he'd expanded, modernized, and watched it grow from his office in Chicago. But lately, something hadn't felt right. Customer complaints were up, missing items, late deliveries, rude drivers. Yet paperwork showed everything running smooth. Too smooth. He didn't trust the reports. So, he shaved his beard, rented a cheap apartment near one of the delivery hubs, and created a fake identity. Zach Walters, new recruit hired through a temp agency to cover for staff shortages. No one had ever seen his face in this location, not even the local manager. It was perfect. Inside the hub, the air smelled like coffee and cardboard. A few drivers were already loading their vans. "Yo, new guy!" a voice called from behind a stack of totes. Zane looked up. A short woman in a ponytail tossed him a reflective vest. "You're Zach, right? I'm Shay Felix, dispatcher. You're with me today." "Cool," he said, catching the vest. She gave him a once-over. "You ever driven a delivery route before?" "Kind of. Did ride share for a while." She nodded and motioned him to follow. "You'll be shadowing Darius today. He's solid. One of the best." Zane followed her through the bustling warehouse toward a slim guy in a navy hoodie, loading bags into a van. "Darius, this is Zach. He's riding with you." Darius glanced over. "Hope you got good shoes, man. It's gonna be a long day." Zane climbed into the passenger seat and shut the door. "I'm ready." The day moved fast. They dropped groceries at single moms' doorsteps, elderly folks who waved from behind screen doors, and sleepy students. Darius worked fast, polite to everyone, double-checking every order. Around noon, they stopped at a gas station for a quick snack. That's when Zane noticed Darius staring at his phone, jaw tight. "Everything cool?" Zane asked. Darius hesitated, then shook his head. "Nah, it's just one of the orders we dropped off earlier. The customer marked it as missing 2 items. But I know I packed them." Zane leaned in. "So what happens now?" Darius laughed, but there was no humor. "I get docked for it." Zane blinked. "Wait, what?" "Yeah, new policy. If something goes missing and there's no proof it wasn't your fault, it comes out of your check. Manager says it's to keep us accountable." Zane felt a sharp knot tighten in his stomach. "How often does that happen?" "Often enough," Darius muttered. "I've paid for someone's almond milk, a steak once, even cat litter. None of it was my fault. But unless you record every bag you hand off, you eat the cost." Zane sat back, stunned. He watched Darius put the phone away and take a bite of his protein bar like it was just another day. Back at the hub that evening, Zane stayed behind to help unload. He watched Shay argue with another driver who was clearly upset, holding up a receipt. "I'm not paying for this," the driver said. "It was sealed. I handed it off sealed." "Take it up with Jordan," Shay said stiffly. "I don't make the rules." Zane waited until the driver stormed out, then approached Shay. "Who's Jordan?" "Manager here," she said. "He pushes that deduction policy hard. Says it keeps lazy drivers in check." Zane nodded slowly. "You think it's fair?" She hesitated. "I think it's messed up. But if you question him too much, he cuts your hours." Zane's jaw tightened. "Got it." That night, Zane sat in his apartment, staring at the wall. He thought about Darius, calmly absorbing the cost of someone else's mistake. And all the others probably doing the same. This wasn't the company he wanted to run. And tomorrow he'd meet Jordan. The next morning, Zane stood in the back lot of the delivery hub, pulling black gloves over his hands as sleet coated the cracked pavement. A gust of wind slid between the buildings, biting through his hoodie. He watched employees drag carts out of the warehouse, their boots crunching on the icy ground, faces unreadable in the gray morning light. He hadn't slept much. Instead, he'd spent most of the night reading through internal reports, cross-checking expense logs and driver feedback submissions no one had acted on. A pattern had emerged: discrepancies in item shortages, a steady rise in driver turnover, and a noticeable drop in employee-submitted concerns following the arrival of one name, Jordan Kessler. Zane hadn't seen him yet, but that was about to change. Inside, the small employee break room reeked of burnt coffee and reheated noodles. A corkboard sagged with faded flyers, company policies, outdated safety tips, a birthday announcement from last year. A few drivers huddled around the metal table, hunched over their phones. Darius sat near the vending machine, staring down at a worn spiral notebook, lips moving slightly as he went over his route. Zane stepped in, brushing past a tall man in a pressed pullover who was barking instructions at Shay near the door. "You didn't double-check the weight tags again," the man snapped. "If corporate sees another misload, it's on you." Shay nodded tightly. "Got it." The man turned and caught sight of Zane. His eyes flicked to the borrowed badge clipped to his vest. "You the temp?" "Yeah," Zane said. "Zach. Starting my 3rd day." The man didn't offer a handshake. "Jordan. I run this hub. Stay out of the way, keep your head down, and don't talk to customers unless you're apologizing." Zane kept his expression neutral. "Understood." Jordan jerked his thumb toward the loading bay. "You're with Van 4. That's Elena's route. She'll be waiting." Zane found her in the far corner, sealing a tote with a thick strip of tape. Elena was in her late 50s, short with a sharp bob and a no-nonsense energy. Her van was already half-loaded, the route pre-programmed on her mounted tablet. "I don't need help," she said without looking up. "Shay assigned me," Zane said. "Said I could learn something from you." She glanced over, sighed, and handed him a crate. "Fine, but stay out of my way. I run tight." By the second stop, Zane realized she wasn't exaggerating. Elena moved with precision, tapping codes into apartment buzzers, stacking crates perfectly, never wasting a second. But her knees clearly bothered her. She winced every time she stepped up into the van. Still, she didn't slow. "You've been doing this long?" Zane asked as they waited at a crosswalk. Elena narrowed her eyes. "Long enough to know what corners not to cut." "Always solo?" "Not by choice," she muttered. "Supposed to be a 2-person route. But Jordan says I'm too efficient to need anyone. So he keeps giving my helper to someone else." Zane looked at the route sheet. "You've got 42 stops." 45, Elena corrected. 3 got added while we were driving. "That normal?" "Lately, yeah. He calls it load optimization. I call it burnout." By mid-afternoon, Elena's limp had worsened. She refused to let Zane carry more than 2 bags at a time, insisting she had her own system. At one stop, a customer opened the door mid-delivery and accused Elena of forgetting a case of sparkling water. "We don't have that listed," Elena said, calmly checking the receipt. "It's not part of your order." "I ordered it," the woman insisted. "You people always mess this up." Zane stepped forward. "Ma'am, I helped pack this one. The order matches the manifest." The customer scoffed and slammed the door. Back at the van, Zane glanced at Elena. "Is that the kind of complaint that gets you docked?" "Sometimes," she said. "Depends on Jordan's mood." When they returned to the hub, Jordan was waiting by the check-in station, arms crossed. "She shorted another stop," he said, waving a tablet. "Customer says she was rude and left early." Elena didn't flinch. "She got everything. She didn't like that, I wouldn't carry it inside for her." "That's not your call to make," Jordan snapped. "You're here to deliver, not argue." "I followed policy." "You're on warning. Next one's a deduction." Zane watched as Elena's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. She signed off on her route and limped away toward the locker room. Zane turned to Jordan. "You always handle driver concerns like that?" Jordan looked him up and down. "You want to keep this gig or play HR?" "I just think people deserve to be heard." Jordan leaned in slightly. "You push too hard, we'll find someone else. There's always another temp." Zane didn't respond. He walked out of the warehouse, pulled out his phone, and called the head of HR under a private number. "I need a full audit on Jordan Kessler's disciplinary actions. Every deduction, every written warning, and every driver reassignment. I want it today." That evening, Zane returned to the break room. Darius was gone, but a younger guy named Manny was eating cold noodles from a paper bowl. He looked up when Zane entered. "You're Zach, right? The temp?" "Yeah." "You hear what happened to Micah?" "No, what?" "Got let go this morning. Supposedly missing too many items on his route. But I saw him pack yesterday. He's careful. Like, paranoid careful." Zane sat across from him. "Did he say anything before he left?" "Just that he was tired of being treated like a thief." Zane leaned back, heart pounding. "How many people has that happened to?" Manny shrugged. 6, maybe 7 in the last month. Most of them were full-time. Jordan replaces them with temps. Less hassle, no benefits. Zane stood slowly. "Thanks for telling me." Manny nodded. "You seem different from the others. Just watch your back." Zane left the building and walked the long way back to his apartment, past shuttered shops and flickering streetlights. The wind had picked up again, pushing dry leaves across the sidewalk. He stopped at a bus shelter and sat down, eyes on the pavement. He had seen enough. Tomorrow he wouldn't be Zach Walters anymore. Tomorrow Jordan would answer directly to the man who signed his paychecks. At 6:45 the next morning, the front door to the warehouse opened and in walked Zane Whitlow, not as Zach the temp, but in a pressed charcoal coat and polished boots, carrying a black portfolio under one arm. His usual quiet was gone. His stride was direct, steady. By the time he passed the first row of delivery vans, a few heads turned his way. Shay was standing near the dispatch board, marking out routes with a dry erase pen. When she looked up and saw him, her hand froze mid-stroke. "Good morning, Shay," he said. She blinked. "Wait, you're Zane Whitlow. I own this company." Her mouth parted, but before she could say anything else, he continued. "Where's Jordan?" She glanced toward the internal office without saying another word. Inside, Jordan was at his desk, sipping coffee and typing rapidly across 2 screens. He didn't notice Zane until the door clicked shut behind him. "Can I help you?" Jordan asked, eyes narrowing. Zane set the portfolio down on the desk, unlatched it, and removed a thin stack of printed documents. He laid them out one by one: driver deduction records, route overloading reports, HR complaints that had been marked resolved without any follow-up, and 6 signed statements from employees across 2 shifts. Jordan's voice dropped. "What's this supposed to be?" "Confirmation," Zane said. "You've been pushing policies that violate wage laws and internal code. You've falsified justifications for deductions, denied break coverage on high-volume days, and retaliated against employees who questioned you." Jordan pushed back from the desk. "You're blowing this way out of—" "No," Zane cut him off. "I've spent the last 4 days working shoulder to shoulder with the people you've been exploiting. I've seen it. I've recorded it, and I'm not asking for an explanation. Jordan stood, but Zane didn't flinch. You're done here, Zane said. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out. Jordan's face twisted. You're going to tank this hub over some whining drivers? Zane picked up the documents and returned them to the portfolio. I'm saving it from you. Less than 10 minutes later, a uniformed officer from the building's contracted security firm walked Jordan through the exit. No one clapped. No one cheered. They just watched. Zane returned to the floor. Shay, he said, I need to speak to the full team. Morning and evening shifts. I don't care if they're already out, reschedule what you have to. Everyone needs to be here by 6 tonight. She nodded, still looking like she hadn't fully processed what had just happened. By early evening, the warehouse was quieter than usual. Vans had been rerouted to cover for the delay, and temporary hold messages had been sent to customers with late deliveries. Most understood. Some didn't. Zane didn't care. This was more important. The break room was too small, so they gathered in the warehouse's central loading bay. Zane stood on a wooden crate beside the whiteboard where route maps were usually posted. Around 30 drivers, packers, and dispatchers stood in a loose semicircle, coats still zipped, some holding paper coffee cups. Darius stood near the back, arms crossed. Elena was seated on an overturned crate, her right knee wrapped in a compression sleeve. Manny leaned against a steel support beam, chewing the inside of his cheek. No one said anything. Zane cleared his throat. I owe you all an apology, he said. This company carries my name. I built it from the ground up, but I let it run without me for too long. Somewhere along the way, we lost something vital: fairness, respect, and the basic decency of treating people like people. He let the silence hang for a beat. I've spent the last 4 days working alongside you. I watched how much you care. I saw how hard you push yourselves to make sure someone's groceries get to their door on the worst kind of days. And I also saw the ways you've been hurt by the very system that's supposed to support you. He looked directly at Elena next. No more single-person routes without proper medical clearance and support. Then he turned toward Darius. No more paycheck deductions without full investigation and documented evidence. From now on, the burden of proof is on us, not you. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I've terminated the site manager. Effective immediately. We're bringing in a new interim operations director, a regional supervisor who's been with us for 8 years and who knows how to lead without intimidation. Long-term, we'll be hiring locally, and that process will involve employee feedback. A hand went up near the front. It was a young woman with a clipboard tucked under her arm. What about the people who already got fired? She asked. Can they come back? I'm reviewing each case personally, Zane replied. If their records were clean, they'll be given the option to return with back pay for any wrongful deductions. No questions asked. Another driver stepped forward. He looked barely 20, his cap pulled low. Are we still expected to record every handoff? 'Cause that's been slowing us down bad. Zane nodded. That policy's suspended starting now. We're implementing a tamper evidence seal system on all totes. It'll protect both you and the customer, without putting the burden entirely on you. He stepped down from the crate and looked around the room. Some of you might not trust me yet. I get that. But I'm not going back to Chicago until this place runs the way it should. No more silence. No more fear. You have my number now. Use it. He handed out printed cards, each stamped with his direct contact line and the name of the new compliance officer who would be stationed on site 3 days a week. As the crowd began to disperse, several employees lingered. One of them was Shay. She walked up slowly, rubbing the back of her neck. So, you really were the new guy? Zane gave a weary nod. Learned a lot. Shay glanced around. You're gonna have a rough time fixing this place. I know, but I think you're serious, and that changes things. Am I going to see a resignation letter from you? No, not unless you try replacing us all with robots. He almost smiled. Fair. Later that evening, Zane returned to the small apartment where he'd been staying. The heater buzzed faintly in the corner, and the fridge rattled every few minutes like it was trying to breathe. He sat at the table, took out a notepad, and began writing. Phase 1, Policy Overhaul. Phase 2, Training and Leadership Audit. Phase 3, Launch an Employee Council, rotate members every quarter. Ground rules. Transparency, protection, real voice. He paused, then added one more line. No more decisions made from behind a desk. He sat back, let the pen fall onto the pad, and listened to the wind outside. Tomorrow would be another early start. But this time it wouldn't be undercover. It would be side by side. 2 weeks after Zane's reveal, the warehouse was quieter, not because work had slowed, but because the tension that once hung in the air had finally lifted. It was the first Monday under the new interim operations lead, a woman named Carla Mendez, who had spent the last 3 days observing everything from how routes were assigned to how complaints were logged. Zane had kept his promise. He hadn't returned to Chicago. Instead, he'd moved his temporary office into a spare supply room, across from dispatch, where he kept the door open and his presence felt. That morning, Carla stood in front of the whiteboard, a clipboard tucked under one arm, reviewing the revised route assignments. The changes were subtle but significant. Double coverage on the longest routes, reduced stops for drivers flagged with physical limitations, and time buffers built into the schedule to avoid forcing anyone to rush. Darius walked in just after sunrise, glanced at the board, and then looked at Carla. You actually cut 2 of my stops? Carla nodded. We're testing a new balance model. You're still getting paid the same, but we're spreading the load to keep the pace sustainable. He gave a small, surprised laugh. Didn't think I'd see the day. Across the warehouse, Elena walked slowly down the main aisle, her knee wrapped, but with less stiffness than before. She'd been assigned a part-time assistant, a young trainee named Adri, who now handled most of the lifting. Zane had personally approved her reduced schedule while still maintaining full benefits. It wasn't a favor, it was overdue respect. Inside the dispatch alcove, Shay sat reviewing timestamps when Zane walked up, holding a short stack of printed customer notes. These came in over the weekend, he said. 5 of them mentioned drivers by name. Positive mentions. Shay raised an eyebrow. That's a change. We're going to start tracking them, he said. Every quarter we'll recognize the top 3 mentions, not just for speed or numbers, but for customer impact. Shay leaned back. You're serious about this culture shift. I don't have the luxury of not being serious anymore. She stood, stretching her arms. You're going to make enemies in corporate. I already have, he said, sliding the notes onto her desk. Let them call. I'll answer. In the afternoon, Carla asked Zane to join her in the break room. She had laid out a series of anonymous surveys from the team, along with a printed summary of issues flagged most often. At the top of the list, fear of retaliation, inconsistent expectations, and lack of clarity on how to report misconduct. I want to implement a formal grievance path, she said, tapping the page. Not just HR. Something on site. Anonymous box, rotating committee of peers to review submissions. It sends a message that this place polices itself. Zane nodded. Do it. I'll cover the cost. And every driver gets 30 minutes paid time each quarter to sit down and review what's changed. No one can fix what they don't understand. Carla hesitated. There's one more thing. She handed him a folded piece of paper. It was a printed email chain between Jordan and a third-party recruiter. The final message suggested that Jordan had been quietly collecting personal information on employees who had pushed back on his policies most consistently. There was no proof he'd acted on it, but the intent was clear. Zane folded the paper in half. This goes to legal. Have them follow up with every name mentioned. I want to know if any of those people saw their hours cut or shifts changed without cause. Carla nodded. Already started. Later that evening, Zane returned to the warehouse floor one last time before heading back to his temporary office. Most of the vans were already back, their hatches open, drivers unloading the last crates. A few employees were chatting near the lockers, their voices relaxed, no edge in their tone. Near the back wall, Darius was wiping down his dashboard with a rag. Zane paused by the open door. "Everything runs smooth today?" he asked. Darius sat up. "Yeah, actually got through the whole route without skipping lunch." Zane leaned against the van. "That shouldn't be an achievement. It should be the norm." Darius shrugged. "I'm not used to the norm being fair." Zane looked at him carefully. "You ever think about moving up? Training? Dispatch? Maybe ops?" Darius blinked. "I didn't think that was on the table." "It is now. Carla and I are building a cross-training track. People who've done the work should have a hand in leading it." Darius looked down at the rag, then back at Zane. "I'll think about it." "Good. Let me know." As Zane turned to leave, someone called out from across the lot. It was Adri, the new assistant paired with Elena. She waved a clipboard in the air. "Mr. Whitlow. Elena said to tell you she made every stop today without needing to ice her knee after." Zane smiled faintly. "Tell her I heard, and that I'm proud of her." Adri grinned and jogged back toward the van. It was nearly dark when Zane finally slid back into his office chair. The warehouse outside had gone quiet. He opened his laptop, pulled up the company-wide dashboard, and typed in a new header, "Fair Route Initiative." Underneath it, he began laying out the structure for a network-wide rollout of the changes that had begun in Columbus. He paused only once, thinking back to that first day standing next to Darius in the van, hearing about paycheck deductions with no proof, seeing Elena limp through a 45-stop route, watching Manny's quiet caution in the break room. None of it had been exaggerated. None of it had been acceptable. And none of it would return. The company wasn't fixed. Not yet, but it had turned. Outside, a delivery van pulled into the lot, headlights cutting through the dark. A driver climbed out slowly, stretched his back, and walked toward the door without rushing. Zane watched through the window, then turned back to the screen. The work would continue, but this time it would be built with the people who kept the wheels moving. The right way,